Welcome to the third and final episode on application security. And to have this conversation, I have with me Anand Karyekar, who is also a founding member of the Pune ISC2 chapter. And we've discussed about various aspects in terms of threat modeling, risk assessment, what does shift left mean. And in the second episode, we talked a lot in terms of the vulnerabilities and vulnerability management. In this episode, we are going to talk about something which usually people don't pay attention to. It's kind of taken as granted for good. The reason why I'm saying taken for granted is when an application is developed, launched, and people start using it, it's working very well. Nobody has a complaint. And suddenly things go wrong. It's breached. Somebody exploited a weakness, and you have a situation at hand. And at that point in time, everybody wakes up, turns around, and they would want to find the closest person to point the finger and saying, it is you. Right? It starts with the security team. The security team will say, okay, it's the application team. Application team will say, hey, we are developers. It should have been done by the testing team, or they would say, hey, this should have been looked at by the QA team. Right? So there could be a lot of noise when things go wrong. So the biggest challenge I see for organization is the lifecycle management. And a lot of times people look at from a positive perspective, right? These are positive use cases. Like when you say 1 + 1 is 2, nobody says 1 + 1 should not be 3. So today we are going to discuss one key word here is anti-pattern, or you may call it anti-pattern. And we've been hearing this word in almost every conversation we have when it comes to cybersecurity. You talk about security monitoring, people talk about anti-patterns or anti-patterns. You talk about application development, they talk about it. You talk about business continuity, they're talking about anti-patterns. We talk about resilience, they talk about anti-patterns. So Anand, welcome again to the show. Tell the viewers, what is anti-patterns and why is it important? Huh?
Thanks, Sujit. Once again, really glad to be here to discuss, specific things about application security. Like you said, in this episode, we'll be touching on anti-patterns. Anti-patterns are the things, which we end up doing, which we don't want to do, which we don't start with, which we don't have the intentions to do. But somehow, as we, go through our work, go through our things, we actually kind of trend or peter into those kind of things. So security, as you rightly said, only comes into the picture when something bad happens, or something, it is an event or a breach or whatever, right? But security, should be part of the conscious all along, right? I mean, there's this famous quote, and again, I don't know who said it exactly, so I'm not going to quote the person and do it wrongly here. But the quote goes like this: you need to fix your roof when it's a sunny day, not when it's actually raining. So, like you said, in this episode, let's talk about some of these anti-patterns. I mean, security does get a bad rep. Unfortunately, I'm afraid it's not uncommon. We have seen this in different organizations across the world, and we in security are guilty of that. So let's talk about some of the anti-patterns that I want to highlight here. One of the biggest one for me is when I hear somebody from the security team say, "It's not my job." So this basically is very classic. It reeks of unable to look at the bigger picture. because as a security professional, you would have done your things. Uh, but then, has it really moved the needle as far as improving the security posture is concerned? I can give you one example. Say a
Mhm.
security team has found some vulnerabilities and they have logged this P1 tickets with the application team. And they think their job is done now. They have logged those issues. The ball is in the application team's scope. And they move on to something else. Now, how are you going to track those tickets? Now, even if you have a system to track those tickets, has any progress been done, with respect to those tickets?
Close the ticket. Simple as that.
Yes. So that's the thing, right? So in security, we kind of say, oh, we have done this thing, and the ball is in their court. But what has happened? Because
Close the
unless
ticket.
something has happened, the needle has not moved at all.
Yes.
Right? There's no impact of your job or of your work. And on the other side of the fence, when you talk with the application security teams, they say, yeah, we got those security tickets. We looked at them, but we really didn't understood them. We think they're incomplete. We will take up with the security team later. So they have kind of deprioritized it on the get-go. Or worst case, they have ignored it. And more often than not, this leads to blame game in the end. Right? So this is a big one for me. The another one is security team keeps on changing the platform or tools. Now again, this happens, in quite many cases. This is very real. I mean, we in security, we have strong reasons of why we want to change the tool set or move on to a different platform. There are a lot of business drivers. I mean, one of them is cost. If you look at how these tools are licensed, initially there's a huge discount for a year or two, and after that initial period is done, the cost of the tools basically skyrockets. So there are a lot of drivers to actually change the tool set. But every time when a tool is changed, it leads to tremendous amount of pain and toil for the application teams. Because with new tools, we're talking about new vulnerabilities, new sets of false positives and false negatives on top of everything that the application security team is faced with. So nobody's thinking about, uh, how we can transition the rest of the organization to these new tools or the tool set. Can we actually employ the new vendors and use their resources to help our organization transition to this new tool set? Most of the times, this doesn't happen, and we just pass on the toil and pain to the application teams, to the rest of the organization. One of the other anti-pattern is security team won't provide support or cannot build something new. So we have seen this, we have heard this. Security team lays down, say, a grandeur list of things, that the rest of the application teams have to adhere to, but they don't necessarily provide the support for the application teams to actually make that progress and actually adhere to those items. I'll give an example. Say a security team comes up with a threat modeling process. And one of the aspects they're pushing for is your threat model needs to be reviewed through security architecture team. When the application teams, turn around and they start doing these things, they find out that this security architecture team is booked for 2 quarters. They don't have the bandwidth to do your reviews of your threat model. So the application teams cannot comply to what the security teams are actually proposing. So this is not a good situation, right? That security team is actually mandating certain things, but then they're not providing the support, to actually help application teams secure that compliance. Right? In case of vulnerabilities, we talked in the last episode, we have seen that security teams or their tools basically dump a huge set of vulnerabilities onto the application teams, but they don't necessarily provide the context. They don't necessarily provide how to go on prioritizing these security vulnerabilities. So the real fallout of this is application teams basically leave security to the end, because they are thinking, let's go ahead and once we are close to the release, we'll think about this, or let's execute our milestone and then we can think about this. So in a way, that creates a pathway for pushing the security to the right instead of shift left, and that is not good.
Okay.
And then two more anti-patterns that I would like to highlight. When we talked in the last episode, the security team basically dumps, huge number of vulnerabilities onto the application teams. So we talked about that in the last episode. The application teams basically get drowned in this sea of vulnerabilities, and they have no way to figure out, which ones to go after. So by doing this, the security teams is actually doing disservice, because we are basically holding the application teams from actually working on those things that will actually improve the security posture. And the last anti-pattern I want to touch on today is prioritization decisions are not made risk-based. So especially in the context of application security, because they're faced with this huge number of vulnerabilities, the prioritization decision goes up the chain. And when the executives are making those decisions, they are making those decisions without some good high fidelity data, right? Again, like we talked in the last episode, there is no methodical consideration of reachability, exploitability, known exploitations, and things like that. So the risk mitigation or the risk acceptance decisions are kind of made ad hoc. And in worst case scenarios, they are made when an executive, who has a strong presence or who has a strong voice in the meeting, he gets his way.
How
And
long?
then, and then the organization thinks that they are doing something, but they are not really moving the needle as far as improving the security posture is concerned. So these are some of the patterns that I wanted to highlight.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether it is fair for me to use the word scary situation.
No, this is scary. And like I said, teams, I've seen in organizations that security teams actually peter into this anti-pattern slowly but surely, right? They don't, I mean, the security leadership team should be very much, they should basically be very mindful of these anti-patterns and how they play out in the organizations, because these anti-patterns, they basically create a significant headwind towards the goal of improving the security posture, right? And that's the reason security teams actually exist in the business. So these anti-patterns are basically shooting yourself into the foot in the end, right? You are basically compromising your security mission.
Mm. And I mean, while we spoke about the challenges, I mean, I don't want to use any other words. Right? I will use the word in a very mild way. These probably we can call it challenges. What would be your advice in your experience that if you were to advise the people out there or the young people who are planning to, launch a career in application or application development or application security, what would your advice be? What should they be focused on?
So a couple of things. First thing is awareness, that they need to be mindful of these anti-patterns, that these things do happen in the organizations. We have seen this happening in many organizations. So if you want to fix something, you first need to know that that's happening. So that's where to begin with, and then the next action is basically, as a security professional, or I will say as a security leader, uh, you have to start developing this culture where you are mindful of these anti-patterns and then lay down some action plans so as to arrest these anti-patterns, right? And this has to be done in partnership with your executive leadership, because in the end you need to have some action plans which will avoid what I like to call as progressive degeneration of the security mindset, of the security policies, and that does happen in the organization.
Very interesting. I mean, you spoke about the culture, right? I mean, that's a separate topic, and I don't want to poach that into this conversation. But there's a lot of takeaways for the viewers, right? So it's anti-patterns or anti-patterns, we may call it, is something people do not pay attention to, right? In every conversation, you will have to spend some time talking about what those patterns are and what measures you need to put in place to avoid a serious lapse in the
and that
future,
is
right?
and that is the reason, uh, because it has to be part of all the conversations, but it is often overlooked, and that is the reason this has to be a top down approach. right? The senior leadership really needs to understand these anti-patterns, how they play out, and then what action plans can be done to kind of arrest them.
Before I let you go, you said the senior leadership to drive this. And they need to be educated. They need to be made aware. Who should do it?
I mean, who in the security leadership you're saying, or who in the senior leadership?
Who in the organization should create that awareness to the leadership, saying that they need to support this?
I would say it primarily starts with CISOs, because you are the ones who are in the end responsible for and accountable
Mhm.
for the security and the security posture of the organizations. And like I said, the security anti-patterns create significant headwinds towards your security mission. So that's what I would say. What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, it has to be a collective effort, but somebody has to create awareness to the leadership as well as to the teams on the ground, everyone. And sometimes you need to create awareness with the business teams as well,
Yep.
right? Because they may be, trying to achieve certain targets or maybe wanting to, achieve something. When the competition is trying to do something, they also want to do something, right? So they whether it is a fully developed product or partially developed, they want to be there saying, okay, we got something out there. For example, I mean, I see this amongst the banking community. Everybody wants to be called a digital bank, and everybody wants to have a digital presence, and they want to, boast saying, we got our onboarding process digitized. You don't have to come to the bank to present yourself to open a bank account. Do it at the comfort of your homes. Right? While it's a good thing to do, good thing to talk about, but I think it is very important to set the basis right, the processes right, the right controls to be implemented. And as always, I always advocate everything should be audited, and it should have a way to audit it. You need to be able to produce evidence of everything what happens in an application. Right. So it is important, right? So for me, when we talk about an application, it's like building a house. Everybody should be involved. Nobody can say it is not my job,
Yes.
right? The carpenters, the masons, the engineers, the architects, right? I
So these
mean,
anti-patterns, they happen at all levels of the
all
organization.
levels, absolutely.
Yeah. And first to recognize these anti-patterns and then have some plans to mitigate them. Uh, that again, I know that you said we can talk about culture later, but then that has to be driven top down mainly, so that you set an example, you set a driving force, you set a forcing function, for everyone in the organization to kind of be mindful of these anti-patterns and come up with ways to mitigate it.
Correct. So viewers, as we draw close to this episode, I'd like to convey to you a couple of takeaways. Start when you are discussing the designs, right? At the requirement stage. And Anand always says, right? I mean, in my private conversations with him, he always says, secure by design, privacy by design. So if you build those principles into all your product life cycle, then you're going to achieve a good product at the end of the day, right? The biggest challenge all of you will experience is when you're overwhelmed with a list of vulnerabilities, right? So you would be presented with vulnerabilities with application specific, and every application is dependent on an operating system. There are times where Anand and I have, in our experiences, we found you fix the vulnerability at the operating system level, the application fails, it breaks. So, in order to keep the application running, you got to keep the vulnerabilities at the operating system level open. So you cannot, say this is my job or that is the other person's job. This is a collective effort, right? From the architect to the business analyst to the engineers who design the code, everybody should work in concert. Like it's like a choir. You've got to sing together and you have to make a harmonious melody. Sometimes the melody is good and you get, lost in the melody, and that's where things go wrong. So with that note, Anand, thank you so much for being here, sharing your experience, your views. I look forward to seeing you in another edition where we're going to talk about what would happen if these codes are developed using AI. If AI were to develop these codes, would it solve the problem or would it amplify the problem, right? So that's for another day. So with that thought, viewers, as always, thank you so much for being here, listening to us, watching all our videos. If you do have a specific topic you want us to cover, put that down in the comments and we will try to bring the professionals. Or if you do have any questions for Anand, you can reach out to him. We would be giving Anand's LinkedIn profile details, so you can send him a direct message. Or if you can't reach him directly, you can reach out to me and I would facilitate that conversation with him. And as always, like the video, hit the subscribe button and follow us. And off list, share this video. And there's a lot of good things where you can take and implement in your organizations. So with that note, thank you so much. And until I see you again, take care and stay safe.
Thanks, Sujit. Thanks, everyone. I really enjoyed being part of this discussion series.